Hi, welcome to the Sticky Thoughts podcast. Here we talk about thoughts that stuck to us. We get curious, we get honest, and we try not to spiral, but no promises. We are your hosts. This is Kajal Singh.
And this is Smriti Kamath, and on this podcast, we are showing up not as psychologists, but as friends who are also psychologists.
Yes, and today we want to talk about Stockholm Syndrome.
Yes, essentially. So I found this reel on Instagram, which was by Laura Richards. It was posted under the Instagram account Crime Analyst. She's a criminal behavior analyst. And she was talking about the Stockholm Syndrome in that reel, okay? I've always known Stockholm Syndrome as a concept that I found very weird and it honestly did not make a lot of sense to me. It also sounded very victim blamey to me. And the context that I've seen it being used in usually is, to kind of shift the blame onto the person who's staying, to be like, why don't they just leave? And so it's just a concept that hasn't really made sense to me. And then when I saw this reel, she was talking about how Stockholm Syndrome might not be real or like is not real. And it really blew my mind. And I immediately shared that reel to Kajal, and I was like, you need to see this. Then, when we got on a Google Meet about it, I was like, okay, Kajal, so what do you think about the Stockholm Syndrome? Like, what is your idea of it? And then tell me what you told me.
Yeah, so I don't remember actually having read this anywhere, but I hear this term around so much, even with our other psychologist friends, other peers, and everybody else, it's quite common. So I think I told you that, oh, I know Stockholm Syndrome, it is where people are held hostages, and in the hostage situation, since it's only the kidnapper or whoever in power, and so you obviously do anything and everything that they tell you to do in order to survive, but you possibly can't mean it. You possibly can't mean when you say, oh, yes, I love you. Oh, yes, I will do anything for you. Oh, yes, I will go anywhere with you, etc. All of that. You would say that, of course, to manipulate the kidnapper so as they think that they can be more lenient with us, maybe with the hostages, just so as to manipulate them enough to be able to get out of the situation. And I thought the myth was ki, oh, Stockholm Syndrome means hostages falling in love with their kidnappers. And you told me that that was the layman understanding, is the actual understanding of Stockholm Syndrome. And I was so confused because how could that be?
I,
Who's saying that? Who's saying ki hostages are falling in love with their kidnappers? What does that even mean?
because I presented this information to Kajal, trying to have this whole gotcha moment of like, oh yeah, see, I also thought that, but that's actually not true. And then I'm just like, very anticlimactic probably for you, but you are right on that. What she thinks is the myth is what most people believe.
Yeah. And then I took it up as a challenge ki no, that can't be the real definition of Stockholm Syndrome. So we need to look it up. We need to find out what the real definition of Stockholm Syndrome is. And I'm going to prove you wrong. Then we went online and we were so underwhelmed with whatever we found. There was only a regular your Google definition, then your AI definition, and then there were very few research papers on Stockholm Syndrome to start with. But then we thought, ki, oh, let's start with finding out who coined the term Stockholm Syndrome. And then we found that Nils Behrot had coined the term. And he is a criminologist. He's also a negotiator, a psychiatrist. So I thought, okay, yeah, so it is a legit term. And then we were expecting to find a paper written by Niels Behrot, as you would. Because in the science world, for you to be able to get credit for coining a word, it has to be somewhere. Maybe sometimes it's also in interviews, or otherwise, if you want to make sure that you get the credit, maybe you write a research paper on it, maybe you write an article on it. But
Or
then
it's in your book or something like that.
yeah, in your book or somewhere. But we couldn't find anything, which was so confusing. We did come across a few research papers about Stockholm Syndrome, and even the research papers did not have any direct citation of their understanding of Stockholm Syndrome, which was like, oh my god, did we all just make it up ourselves?
Yeah, and to kind of blow your mind a little bit, You should go Google who coined the term Stockholm Syndrome because it will tell you that it's Niels Behrud. But then, in the quest of trying to find things about Stockholm Syndrome, we came across this podcast transcript that at first we had kind of just glanced over because it was like, why are we going to refer to this? But then we couldn't find anything else. So, as a last resort
Resort.
sort of a thing, we went through that. And it was a long transcript and it had so much information that we dedicated, I think, hours to sit and read it together. And I think we got the most information there. It's a really good podcast. I do highly recommend listening to it, although we did not listen to it, we read it, but we also recommend reading it, honestly.
Mhm.
It's really interesting, and it is a podcast by Radiolab. The hosts are Latif Nasser and Sarah Kari. This podcast episode is called How Stockholm Stuck.
Very interesting name.
And yeah, really, really cute name. Good name. You should imagine our surprise when we find out that Niels Perut did not coin that term at all.
Yes.
He didn't even say it. He didn't say it once.
And that was so shocking. I would not have imagined the person who actually coined the term did coin the term in my wildest dreams. It was the New York Police Department, Harvey Schlossberg, who randomly coined the term. And it's called Stockholm Syndrome, according to him, because the incident happened in Stockholm at a bank. So, do you want to talk about the bank hostage
Yeah.
situation and how they reduced whatever happened at the bank to the Stockholm Syndrome term?
Yeah. So I think that's a very interesting story. First of all, again, I'm gonna ask the listener to please go and head over and listen to that podcast because they have, the whole story, they have captured it so well. And basically, what happened was there was this bank robbery. And before that, there had been bank robberies, but I think at least in Sweden, there were no hostage situations as such. And this one was a hostage situation. So they did not really have a negotiator or anybody like that. But they did have Nils Perut, who was a psychiatrist and I think was also a criminologist. So they kind of just took him and put him there. He also did not have an idea about how to negotiate because he did not have any sort of prior experience with that sort of a thing at all. What they did notice was that even though there was police outside, the hostages were inside, and I think there were points where they could have escaped, or they could have come out, or they could have asked for help, or something like that, but they didn't, and they stuck with the people who were keeping them hostage, which really confused everybody. There were also rumors that the people being held hostage did not testify in court against them later. That was a rumor, they did testify. Niels Perut actually did not call it Stockholm Syndrome. But then, so in 1972 at the Munich Olympics, there was a hostage situation. And looking at that, the NYPD was kind of like, okay, if something like this happens in New York, do we have a plan for this? And they did not, because I think relatively hostage situations were new or something at that time. And then for that task of developing a training program for the police department, this officer called Harvey Schlossberg was appointed to make a training program for them. So he was looking at hostage situations and he looked at the Stockholm situation as well, which was the bank robbery. And he was the one who has been recorded saying or using the term Stockholm Syndrome for the first time. Not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, not a behavior analyst, not a criminologist, a police officer. And he was the one who used this term for the first time. And he's noted to say at this point, let me suffice to say that Stockholm syndrome simply means the forming of a relationship. Of course, the more stress in the situation, the quicker the relationship and the more intense it's gonna be. So this is what he was telling the his fellow police officers and about what he thinks Stockholm syndrome is. But then, yeah, I think that itself is such a big revelation to me, at least. the whole, like, we've been using Stockholm syndrome around and people have been using it, but it didn't even come from like a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anybody like that. It came random, it was randomly said by somebody not even from Sweden, but from NYPD talking about the
Mhm.
case.
Yeah.
How did you
Yeah.
feel finding out about that?
I felt so many things. I don't know. I felt shattered in a way, because we put so much trust on whatever we find online, like this syndrome, that syndrome, coined around and used around so loosely, and we trust so much in it. I remember using it, earlier with my friends. Now it's lost its meaning. So I think I did feel shattered in a way, not just for this term, but also, for other terms. And maybe it calls for us to be a little more vigilant, labeling
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and maybe also believing other people's labels that they use.
I don't know if I used the term as much because I already felt it was a very weird term. But then, I heard it in the song. I really loved One Direction, and I had heard Stockholm Syndrome around. And while I did not agree with what it meant and everything, I did take it seriously. And there's something to it, like, because it sounds wrong and it seems off, but I did think that there's at least a psychological base to it. So when I found out that it was coined by a police officer, I was so thrown off because I was like, really? So he just randomly said that, and everybody's using it now. And even when you look it up on Google, it says that Nils Behrud, who psychiatrist, coined it. So that was a really big mind blown moment. And another thing that came up in the podcast was that nobody really spoke to Kristen and Mark, who was like one of the main people being held hostage, out of which this whole thing came about. She was attached and fell in love with the captor because
Hmm.
I think people heard her on the radio.
So when you say
Heard her.
people heard her on the radio, it was because the whole Sweden bank robbery hostage situation was
Mm,
aired for everybody to be able to hear
yeah.
and watch them. So
Mm,
that's when they also heard the hostages, maybe sometimes
yeah.
talking, walking in, out, something like that. Nobody from the hostages were interviewed, including not Kristen and Mark.
That was also another big blow, that you didn't even talk to the person who apparently experienced all of this attachment and love and everything like that. And Alan Wade in this podcast episode does go and interview Kristen and Mark, who gives a lot more insight about the whole situation and what really happened. So, cumulatively, from what I've gathered in that podcast episode, the reason why people being held hostage were so compliant with the captors is because of, I think, three reasons. Okay. First one was that they could not trust the police. So the police had practically no experience with hostage situations. So they were not really being on the side of the hostages. They were trying to capture the robber and get them, arrest them, but they were not really looking out for the hostages involved. Like, they would have been okay with their lives being on the line. So the hostages couldn't really trust the police because they figured that they don't really have their best interest in their mind. And can you tell us about the second reason, which has to do with that prime minister and what he said to Kristen and Mark?
Yeah. And before I say that, it is not our place to maybe comment on how the police were reacting because obviously we were not there. It was only from the perspective of the hostages that they were not
Mm,
feeling protected. The police have orders from somebody else and they have their own
mm,
priorities. And maybe the police were looking at the bigger picture of capturing the captors so that it doesn't happen again, all of that. And their top priority might not be the hostages inside, five, six hostages that were inside. But obviously, for the hostages, it's them, it's themselves, and it's about their
yeah, of
own
course.
family. And they did not feel protected, maybe rightfully so, maybe
Hmm.
very realistically so. So they did everything in their capacity to be able to get out of the situation and not trusted the police, of course. Yeah.
So, in that situation, the people who were being held hostage were kind of just in their perspective, trying to go with the lesser evil from what they can sense is, on one hand, you feel like the police is at least, ready to throw you under the bus if it comes to that. But on the other hand, the people who have captured you are, of course, you're not attached to them and you don't really have positive feelings towards them, but at least they're doing the bare minimum of making sure that you are fed and that you get to call your family once and tell them that you're in the situation. Of course, it's a really like bare minimum and not great at all. But comparing these two, it is why it felt like, or and it seemed to people like they were siding with the captors, because in this really bad situation they were in, it probably felt like the captors are doing more for them than the police is. Then there was also the conversation or communication that they had with the prime minister. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the captors were making demands from the police and the government. They were also sort of in contact with the Prime Minister of Sweden. And one of the hostages heard the Prime Minister say, "Wouldn't it feel good for you to die at your post?" Yeah. So when you hear that, and you are under capture by kidnappers, two male kidnappers who have experience of crime before. So one of the kidnappers was already in the jail, and the other kidnapper had asked the government of Sweden to bring him from the jail to here. So, this is very strange and very, I think, important for us to notice that the captors were making demands from the government also. And they were
Hmm.
also listening to them so that they are able to yield their benefits, or they are able to get out of this situation for them. So, this is them answering their demands, fulfilling all their demands. They asked for this man to get out of the jail. They also asked for a van. They also asked for food, vagera. See, all of those demands were met. So obviously, when you are under their hostage, you are also sort of listening to their demands, or at least trying to make sure that you fulfill as much as you can so that you are at least able to breathe for a little longer.
And especially in a situation where your life is at risk and you see that these captors are extending something to you, whether it's food or the call or whatever, in that situation where you do see that they are extending these very slight quote unquote helping hands to you, I think that it makes sense for the people to think, okay, if at least they are trying to extend this thing to me, I need to at least seem like I am on their side so that they don't see me as a threat. So then they can keep being quote unquote nice to me. Otherwise, of course, that would also be revoked by them. As a strategy, it makes perfect sense for them to do that. And then the third reason, Alan Wade from this podcast interviewed Kristen and Mark. And one of the things that came up was when everybody was calling their family, Kristen heard Birgitta's conversation with her husband, and she was telling him about how she's not going to be home tonight because she's held hostage, and to pick their two daughters from school, and that there's food in the fridge and all of that. And that really made her emotion. It made her feel like she's, by doing this and by complying with the captors, she's also protecting Birgitta's two daughters, saving their mother. So it wasn't about the relationship that Kristen has with these captors, but about surviving herself and helping Birgitta out by pretending that you're on their side, at least in that moment. And again, these people also testified after the incident. So they were never attached or in love with the captors or anything like that.
Yeah. And even in the interview that Alan Wade had with Kristen, this interview happened, I think, some 40, 50 years after the incident. And Kristen talks about how she still feels that she was blamed for the entire thing, how she still feels that everybody thinks that she was in love with her captor, and she continued to feel confused with it,
Hmm.
which is so sad. Which,
Also made her doubt herself.
yeah, while all she did was everything that she could in order to survive and in order to also protect or save other hostages with her. So, here, when we talk about what Stockholm Syndrome actually is, discovered with the podcast, is that patient zero did not have it. So, Kristen, who was supposedly diagnosed with having the Stockholm Syndrome as the first patient of Stockholm Syndrome, she did not have it. She did not fall in love with her captor. So, all of this is just very any. It doesn't mean anything. So today, when you use Stockholm syndrome, it does not mean anything. However,
Exactly.
I do want to bring in the picture how Stockholm syndrome, like Smriti, you said, is used for people stuck in cycles of domestic violence, toxic, abusive relationships. I do want to say that I think reference to our other episode, it comes from trauma. It comes from the element of trauma that we talk about in our other episode, that you do not have enough resources where you understand what love is, where you don't have an example of a healthy relationship, where you lack guidance and maybe other resources to be able to understand love, discover love, find love, live with love. And so you're all confused. And when you get the slightest attention, even if that attention is derogatory, abusive, it is still attention. And since you don't know what love is, or you don't know how a healthy situation looks like, you think this is it. And I think you should expand on it. Smriti.
And first of all, I also want to point out that even though a lot of people use Stockholm syndrome to explain situations where people are stuck in maybe a relationship that's really bad for them and all of that, it's not the same at all. Like, for example, in the hostage situation, you don't know your captor. That's already one of the biggest differences, is why you can't use that term. First of all, that term itself, I don't think it has basis. I think it's a very simplified version of what really goes on. I think that's just what appears on the surface, and it's a very easy way to dismiss what's really going on. In abusive relationships or relationships that are bad, you know the person who is maybe abusing you. You have a relationship with them. In hostage situations, you don't really have a relationship with them. Here, you have a relationship and you have that connection with them. And a lot of that time, that's trauma bonding, which is this cycle of abuse where they are abusive towards you. But then that's not all. People are very quick to say, why don't you just leave? And if you know you're in a bad relationship and if the person is being so bad to you, why don't you just leave? Why are you still staying? But the thing is that the abuse is only one part of the whole cycle. And there's also the part where the abusive person is making up for their actions. Maybe a lot of romantic gestures, saying they're really sorry, saying they didn't mean it, saying they want to be better, and all of that. And I think that this is a very difficult dynamic to get out of, even if you're not married or anything like that, even if you are, as you mentioned, if you have not seen what love is supposed to look like, it's already a really bad rabbit hole to fall into. It's like quicksand, it's really difficult to get out of already. But then as time passes on, like say it's a 1 or 2 year relationship, even, or sometimes in some cases even lesser than that, if that is how you don't have an ideal of what love is supposed to look like. But the more time passes, it just, you feel like you need to stay, right? And then that's like a time thousand when it comes to marriages, when so much is on stake. And I think in so many marriages, abuse can be so common, and people again in marriages are very quick and easy to say, your partner is bad to you, then why don't you leave? But it comes with a lot, and of course, the abuse can happen towards either partner. It can be towards the woman or the man, or either. But It's also that a lot of women being financially dependent on their husbands, and when this domestic violence is happening, it's also another whole layer that they have nothing to go back to, nothing of their own, nothing in their name. And additionally, everything is at stake. And especially if your partner is giving you that hope ki, oh, I'm so sorry that I did that, and I want to work on it, brings you flowers or something, or gives you a gift to make up for it, and then you feel like, okay, maybe this can still be worked on, or sometimes you might even blame yourself because they blame you for it. So yeah, it's a very difficult dynamic to get out of, and it's not as simple as why don't you just get out of it.
Exactly. When the case is that you don't have enough resources to back you up when you are in a situation like this. I mean, when I say resources, it's people, it's family, it's friends, it is finance, it is knowledge, education, all of these count as resources. And when you don't have enough of it to be able to, deal with situations like this, then it also comes upon your self identity, self worth. So, when you have low self worth, low self esteem, you would not be able to value yourself enough to be able to fight against a situation, because what are you fighting for? Because you don't value yourself enough to be able to fight yourself. And it is not a choice, it is a consequence of the lack of resources that you ended up with.
And in the case of hostage situations, it's also about risk management, but here again, it's not about risk management because you're not managing risk, you're just trauma bonded. Again, it's not that the people are attached or in love with the people as portrayed in 365 days. I haven't watched the movie, but I think I have seen enough of it to figure that that's very unrealistic. That's not how it's gonna happen. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
And one movie that you pointed out to me that was very interesting was Highway, which again is a movie that I haven't watched, but everything that you told me about it makes me just look at how you said that, she didn't have a stable family. So she again did not have this chance to go back to something better. So
Yeah.
again, there's a lot more to it. Like, for example, if she had a safe family environment, why would she choose to stay with the captor?
Exactly.
So it's not as simple as ki, oh, it's Stockholm syndrome and she fell in love with the captor.
So in Highway, she had all her family members alive. So she had supposedly human resources, but it was not a safe environment. She could not talk about her sexual assault to anybody. And when she did try to talk about it, she was shut down. And here, when she talks about the same incident with her captor, she was at least acknowledged. So when you find that slightest comfort, you want to
Exactly.
hold on to it.
The same thing you mentioned before.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, that you can't just say, ki, oh, she has Stockholm syndrome and get away with it. That is plain reductive. And one more thing that
Yeah.
really grounded my belief into curiosity as one of the major value that I have in my life. Ki, it's never you acted like this, so this is who you are, and that's it. End of story. Never it. Whatever pushes you to end the conversation, ki, oh, this is figured out. Maybe that could be an alarm for you to dig even deeper, or a push for you to be even more curious. I think this reductive terms like Stockholm syndrome only does harm and no good. It was not just them falling in love with the captors and end of story. It can never be that. It is always their own stories that they come with, their own experiences that they have.
Yeah.
And we, as people outside watching it or reading about it, we would very easily want to say, ki, oh, I would never do that. Or I would never listen to the captor, or I would never say all of that, or I would never stay in a domestic violent relationship. You don't know that. We don't know that unless we have been in that situation, in that exactly same
Exact
situation. We won't know.
Yeah. In most situations where they say that the hostages fell in love with their captor or got attached, it might be a fawn response where they're just trying to please to survive that. Fawn is the fourth F. There is fight, flight, freeze, and there's fawn. Fawn is when you're trying to please. For example, instead of fighting the bear, you make friends with the bear. That's a very silly example. That's not accurate, but you know, that's like that. So these hostages are trying to manage the risk, but in there might still be people who are held hostage who might fall in love with their captors. But that again won't be just because they are captured, like in Highway.
Hmm.
And that is what I want us to look at.
Yeah.
Ki, most of the times, I think that in hostage situations where people might dismiss it as Stockholm syndrome, they were attached, maybe they were actively managing the risk. And even if there are hostage situations where that happens, I really think that the takeaway is that we should dig deeper into what exactly the situation was instead of just bracketing it as Stockholm syndrome and they just fell in love with their captor. Like, no, because like the Highway example tells us, there's something deeper to it. It's not as simple as that. Like if Alia Bhatt in that movie had a safe environment growing up, if people actually listened to her when she was trying to speak up, from her family or from her friends, and she had that support system outside, she would not develop that relationship with that captor. You know, that was because that has not been extended to her before. That is what I also want us to see, because it also shouldn't be like you see one exception to it and you're like, yeah, no, see, Stockholm syndrome
Hmm.
exists. Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, what do you think the stickiest thought was for you, Kajal?
I think the stickiest thought for me was the realization how पहले तो there is no talk about the captors around Stockholm syndrome at all. Ki what the captors are actually doing. Ki
Hmm.
how they could be very dangerous and how they could be looking for a pleasant experience from the hostages and the hostages responding pleasantly to the captors as a response to what they were asked for. How that
Hmm.
was not talked about at all or
Hmm.
is never talked about at all. And the other thing was also how the actual Sweden situation, where the government and the police were also fulfilling the demands of the captors. But that's all right. That's negotiating or whatever. And this is Stockholm syndrome. Wow. Very convenient.
True, very true.
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
what's your stickiest thoughts, Smriti?
I think for me, the stickiest thought was finding out that Stockholm syndrome wasn't coined by the psychiatrist at all, and that it was coined by the police officer. This police officer coined it for hostage situations specifically. I think it's sticky for me that we took this term and then it has been used in such a wide range of situations, including abusive relationships, which are not similar to hostage situations at all. Even in hostage situations, we are kind of being victim blamey towards the hostages, people held hostage, and especially so in abusive relationships when we use Stockholm syndrome there, and how it's not related at all, but it just came to that. I think that's a sticky thought for me.
Okay. So this is the end of the episode. To all the listeners, do let us know what your stickiest thought from the episode was and share it with us in our comments, DMs, email. We would be very happy to receive from you. Thank you for listening. Have a happy weekend. Signing off.
And take care. Goodbye.